Good evening. Welcome. My name is Debbie Keener, and I am the head of marketing and special projects at the Oceanside Library. I would like to introduce my colleague and fellow presenter for tonight, head of adult services here at Oceanside Library, Nadine Spano. We encourage all of you to go to pagingoceanside.com to learn more about our library's Author Spotlight program and the fantastic lineup we have throughout the year. Also, if you are an Oceanside, New York resident, please join our summer reading program. We still have a few weeks left. Go to pagingoceanside.com for more details. Lastly, Nadine and I would like to thank our director, Chris Mara, and assistant director, Tony Iovino, as well as our board of directors and all our fantastic colleagues here in Oceanside for giving us an opportunity to offer all these wonderful programs to the community. So, Nadine, go ahead.
Thank you, Deb. With no further ado, it's time to begin our program. Tonight's guest author is Jessica Anya Blau. Thank you for being here, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Jessica is the author of Mary Jane and 4 other critically acclaimed novels. Originally from Southern California, she now lives in New York. Though in between, she has lived in Baltimore for 20 years. We'll talk about that a little bit. This summer's must-read book is Mary Jane. We picked it for our summer book. It's perfect for fans of the 70s. It's a heartwarming coming-of-age novel that brings us right back to a time when music and lyrics could open our eyes to the whole world. The story introduces us to Mary Jane, a 14-year-old girl living a very sheltered life in Baltimore in the 70s. She lands a summer job as a nanny for a local doctor, and this job seems like a very respectable one for Mary Jane and her family until she arrives to find out that things are not quite as she expected it to be. Mary Jane comes to meet the Cohns and their young daughter Izzy, and she is instantly shell-shocked. The house is in total chaos and disarray. Every surface is clutter-filled. There's no family dinners or healthy foods. Mary Jane comes to find out that Dr. Cohn isn't the traditional doctor that her parents assumed he was, but instead is a psychiatrist who is helping a famous rock star fight addiction. That rock star and his wife then move into the Cohn's home for the summer while Mary Jane is a nanny. This definitely changes Mary Jane's world forever.
Forever.
And I think we can all relate to our first job. Many of us, it was babysitting.
Yes.
As a 14-year-old during that time. And we can talk a little bit about that. But I want to introduce Jessica once again. We're so happy to have you. We talked about this book endlessly.
Yes, this was our summer book pick, our July book discussion, which we had last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We've been passing it around to staff and anybody who asks for a recommendation. So it was a fun book to read. So can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration for Mary Jane? Is there a real Mary Jane somewhere out there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for recommending the book and for reading it and for picking it. I'm so appreciative. That was wonderful. Thank you both so much. So Mary Jane, so it's sort of inspired by a lot of things. I did babysit and I loved babysitting. So, there is that thing of, going into other people's houses. I was always curious about other people's houses and realizing that their house is not your house and that, and their lives are not your lives, and sort of imagining yourself in other lives when you enter other houses. Like, so I think that's part of a coming of age and just part of getting older. And that's my niece behind me. So there is that realization when you start leaving your house more of realizing the world is different. But the story itself with the rock star and all that really came, I was at a party and had met this woman. I was talking to a woman and she had told me that she was a summer nanny for a psychiatrist. And can you guys fix that so that doesn't, sorry. So she was a summer nanny for a psychiatrist. And he had somebody very famous in the house for the entire summer, hidden there for the summer. And so I was at this party and this woman told me about this famous person hiding in the attic of this really nowheresville town in America. And I won't give away the town because I can't give away this woman's story. And, with this massively, massively famous person hiding there all summer long. And of course, I mean, I wanted to lock this woman in a room and grill her with every question possible about her summer with this famous person and being the nanny. And I think maybe because maybe I'm abnormal and maybe she's a normal person, but she kind of, I said, well, did you have dinner together? And she said, yeah, I don't really remember. And I said, well, did you look through their clothes? And she was like, no, I don't. I mean, she just had she just couldn't really remember anything about it except that they were there on the third floor. So as soon as I heard that story, of course, it was filed away in my brain. And I was hanging on to it thinking that's just an amazing thing. And so there's two things about the story. One that just seemed amazing to me, but the second was that it would have been my dream summer. I mean, there's probably nothing I would have loved more than to be a nanny for somebody famous. And and when I was 14, I would have loved for it to be a rock star and a movie star. It would have been the dream life. Babysitting to me was an incredibly fun job, and I loved doing it. And I always wanted to be a mother. That's all I wanted as a little kid. And so babysitting was always fun. But then, celebrities are fun and they're great. So there was that. And then I ghostwrite sometimes. So I had been ghostwriting for a big celebrity. And I was ghostwriting for her, and we were spending a lot of time together. And she had a famous husband too, and she would like FaceTime me from bed every night. And there was like zero boundaries, the way celebrities sometimes are. And and I was working on this book with her, and working on this book, and writing all these pages. And she would spend like a week, we'd be in New York and LA. And she would tell me all these intimate details about her life and everything. And then I'd write a chapter, and she'd say, oh, I don't want anyone to know about that. And so then I'd scrap the chapter. And then she'd tell me everything about her family, her famous family and this. And then I'd write the chapter, and she'd say, oh, I don't want anyone to know about that. So she had a book contract, but she didn't want anybody to know anything. And then we were in her house in Los Angeles, and she pulled down, those giant Tupperware tubs, those huge ones.
Right.
And she pulled down one of those, and she said, these are my diaries, and I haven't looked at them in years. And so we opened it up and we got them out, and she'd kept diaries the way I kept diaries actually as a kid, which is you start it and you keep writing until that thing is full. But she did her whole life, and she was born into fame and had huge fame, and her diaries were, and she's really smart and articulate, and she was a good writer, and her diaries were amazing. So I lined them up in her house by year, and we just went through them and just read them and read them and read them. And at some point I said, these diaries are just amazing. You should just edit these and publish them. And then 2 days later, I was fired, and she said she was going to write the book herself.
Oh.
So I was completely, upset and enraged and humiliated, everything you are when you're fired. And then also because working with somebody, when you ghostwrite, it's so intimate, you get so close to them because it's, they have to tell you everything. It's, it's the Hemingway philosophy of writing. It's the iceberg, and you just show the tip. So when you're ghostwriting with somebody, they tell you, 100%, and you write about 10%, but you know so much that you become really, sort of bonded with these people.
Wow.
So then when she fired me, so it was sort of like a breakup and a firing and a friend, it was like everything all at once. And so I was just completely, everything you feel when you end a friendship, when you get fired, when you break up with somebody, which is, humiliation and rage and whatever. And then I just thought, oh, well, forget about you. I'm going to write a story I really want to write. And then I immediately thought of that story that had been sort of sitting in my head. I guess there's like a room in my head that's sort of like an attic where I keep shoving ideas and story ideas. And there's maybe, 300 novels in there right now. And I just have to sort through the attic in my head and find the one. But it was sort of after working with this particular celebrity that story, I went up to the attic in my head to find what I wanted to write. And it was like, I definitely wanted to write that story. And so then I sat down, and I wrote that story. So that story was a combination of sort of not rage writing, but a response to having, kind of been fired and had my heart broken, and then having this great story that I wanted to write, and then just having my own experience of babysitting and motherhood and going into people's houses. So I guess that's where it all started. And I lived in Baltimore. I had lived in that neighborhood in Baltimore.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
That's amazing. I want to know the other stories in your attic.
Yes, I hope we hear about them too.
Yeah.
That's great. I was going to ask you, do you think maybe that a little bit of Mary Jane is you maybe a little bit too, feeling after this whole, what you just told, that story with the celebrity
Yeah.
and kind of being caught off guard that way, maybe, or just having kind of the, you know, what is it called when carpet pulled out? What it was
The
rug
wool.
pulled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows what I'm saying. You know, that you felt that naivete of Mary Jane a little bit, that you were kind of caught like that, not to like psycho.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, because the celebrities that I put in Mary Jane, I mean, I was really thinking of 70s and celebrities I loved. I mean, not that I didn't, you know, the one I was working with, she was great, other than she fired me. Yeah. But
Right.
so it was more that I was really trying to capture that 70s celebrity where they had a very public persona of wholesomeness and family value. You know, every mother wanted her daughter to marry Liberace, and it was like, really? You kind of can't figure things out about Liberace? So it was sort of like, you know, you know, what you saw on TV and in magazines was different than what might be happening behind the
Or,
scenes. I really wanted to grab that 70s thing. And as far as Mary Jane goes, I mean, I grew up in Southern California in a very, you know, I went to the beach and I rode my bike to the beach, and I had, you know, the beaches in Santa Barbara where I grew up, they have tar on them. And like my feet in the summer would just have this black tar sole that I never took off. You know, it was like I could have walked on glass and you couldn't feel anything because I had like, you know, rubber on the bottom of my feet. And, you know, and I was like brown and, you know, it was just like this different kind of life. But one of my daughters read Mary Jane and she said, Mom, that's you. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, Mary Jane is just you. That's just like, it's just you. It's just you, 14-year-old you. So I think internally, like how she thinks and how she feels and how she sees the world and how she, you know, what she's interested in is, so she, it was just sort of, it was, you know, it was kind of fantasy. As I said, it was me, but not me as I really was in 14, me internally, who I am emotionally and mentally, you know, and where my interests lie in Baltimore at 14 in that situation. So I just sort of threw myself there. And, uh, and then the Baltimore thing was interesting to me because as I said, I grew up in Southern California, but I lived in Baltimore for a while and I lived in that neighborhood. And the way I knew that neighborhood is probably the way that, at least, well, since everybody here is a reader, that most of the readers know that neighborhood, which is through Ann Tyler, which is her, you know, she's in Baltimore and her books take place in that neighborhood, or many of them do. The Accidental Tourist does, and Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant does, and I think Ladder of the Years does. You know, so if you read Ann Tyler's books, that many of them take place in that neighborhood. And her characters shop at Eddie's, where Mary Jane and Izzy shop. And so before I moved to Baltimore, I went to Baltimore to go to graduate school there. So before I moved to Baltimore, I'd read all of Anne's books that she had published up to that time. And I loved them so much. And so in my head, Baltimore was that neighborhood. And so it was sort of kind of amazing, you know, when I actually, it turns out that that neighborhood is right next to Johns Hopkins, where I went to graduate school. And so it's kind of amazing that I actually ended up in this neighborhood that was so clearly in my head from these books.
wow.
And actually I went shopping at Eddie's right after Eddie's Market right after I moved there, and I was in the market and I saw the woman in front of me putting things on a credit, like running a store tab. And I'd been living in Toronto, so I'd come from this big city. And Baltimore is, it's a city, but you know, it's a city that's made up of little villagey neighborhoods almost. And so I'd come from this big city and I was sitting in Eddie's Market and the woman in front of me is putting everything on her tab, and then she gave her name and it was Ann Tyler. And I almost passed out. And so immediately I'm looking at everything she'd just bought, thinking, what does she buy? Oh, she's got a baguette. And okay, look, she got artichoke hearts. You know, I just want to see what she eats. You know, it's like, oh, she has 3 apples. You know, I was just so excited to have her right in front of me in the grocery store. And, you know, and so that would kind of seem magical. And then, you know, so she got her stuff and got her bag and walked out of Eddie's. And then the next words out of my mouth were, can I open an account? And not because I opened an account, but I thought, if she has an account, I want an account. Like, you know, I want to do everything she does. I want to be her. She was like, you know, she's magical to me. So, you know, and her books are amazing. So there's a way in which the book, and just putting it in that neighborhood in Baltimore, is a little bit of an ode to her, and, you know, and how amazing all her books are. But it's also that in having lived in that neighborhood, I learned the history of that neighborhood, and it's a complicated history. I mean, it's a history of, you know, of racism and oppression and, you know, people who were allowed to move into the neighborhood and people who weren't allowed to move into the neighborhood. And so in learning that history, it also made for a really interesting sort of tension to run through the time period in 1975. So in the book, the Cohn family is Jewish, but 1975 was about the first year that Jewish people were allowed to move into that neighborhood. And so Mary Jane's parents, in sort of who they are, it was I mean, I wouldn't say it was typical of the neighborhood. I wasn't there at that time, and I don't know what was typical of the neighborhood or people were, but they were, it was a point of view that existed within that neighborhood at that time. And the Cohns would have been, they would have been, among the first Jews there, which would have been really, a source of tension for Mary Jane's parents.
Right. So actually, we wanted to know that, like, what made you step back into the 70s, and like, how did you research that time period to make it so authentic? So what you just said, was that one of the main reasons for going back into the 70s, so that you could cover those tough topics?
No, I mean, I'm not smart enough to write that way. Like, I don't think things out ahead of time. Like, I just am not. I mean, like, I think my writing brain, I'm just not as smart as my writing brain. So I think that when I sit down to write, these things happen, but they're not really planned out ahead of time. So it's almost like I write and then I can look back and give an answer for why I did anything. But really, when I sit down to write, it's just when I sit down to write, there's a movie that's running in my head. And I sit down, I see the movie, and then I write out the movie. And then once I've written the movie, then I figure out what I just wrote, and then I go back and I rewrite it a few times. So in writing that, in thinking about that time period, I mean, so you couldn't have somebody as naive as Mary Jane. I mean, you couldn't have that now with cell phones and the internet, and you couldn't hide a rock star in an attic, in any city. I mean, like, everything is so impossible, including naivete now. It's like, somebody 14 years old, Mary Jane's age, would have seen internet porn at age 11 or something because somebody's big brother showed it to them.
Right.
So, I mean, like, you just can't, and it's like, so I wanted her to be really innocent and to enter into this world and for things to be so surprising. So, so definitely the neighborhood is sheltered, and she doesn't realize what's beyond that neighborhood. She goes to a private girls' school in that neighborhood. She goes to a country club right there. She goes to the grocery store right there. And so her world is the world of her house and her neighborhood, which is really sort of this contained bubble. And so she doesn't even have to leave the neighborhood for her world to explode. But it wasn't so planned ahead of time as I just sat down to write. So as I said, my books, I rewrite them many, many times, but the opening scene in that book was exactly how I wrote it. I sat down to write and I wrote that opening scene. And when she walked into that house and saw the mess and the Buddha and the stuff, which is actually, it was my childhood house I was having her walk into, but I threw it into Baltimore. So it was my house that had stuff lining the stairs and a crowded refrigerator and clothes everywhere and every flat surface covered with things. So, I took sort of my internal life or myself and walked into that house. And once I had her see that house and walk into that house, I knew then that when she went home, it was going to be tidy, clean, organized, and so it was almost like the answer to the question of sort of that tension between coming out of one place and finding the world's bigger than you think was just answered by how I saw it open up into that house and her seeing that house.
Right.
And the clean house, my best friend when I was growing up, Debbie killed, they weren't like the Dillards. They weren't terrible racist people,
Right.
but their house was that clean and tidy. And it was this wonderfully, like, I loved going to Debbie's house because it was just so organized and so clean and so tidy. And like, you opened the refrigerator and you could see everything that was there, and like, you knew what was, like, everything was identifiable by sight. Like, you didn't have to smell anything or unwrap anything or, or wonder what something was, nothing was like swimming in black gook or floating in oil or, it was like everything was what it was. And then her mother also wrote out a menu for the month of everything they were going to eat for dinner for the month and hung it on the refrigerator. And it always had a main, 2 sides, and a dessert. And she had this like really beautiful, square, legible handwriting. And my favorite thing was the beginning of the month to walk in there and take down that menu and just read every single day what they were going to have for dinner every single night. And then even after I'd read it once, I mean, it's like I almost couldn't walk. It was kind of like I walked in that house, I went straight to the kitchen. I would just go to that calendar and I would look at it and think, oh, what are they having tonight? Oh, meatloaf and iceberg wedge and succotash, and I just loved seeing what was happening each night in that house. So when I had Mary Jane walk into essentially my California house, then I knew she was going to come from my best friend's house, just as far as the houses looked. So it all unwinds for me as it happens.
So did Debbie's house, did they make birds in the nest?
That was sort of based on something that my sister used to make for my nephews. But then when my sister read the book, she was like, Jess, it wasn't pancakes, it was toast. So I kind of got it wrong. I was like, okay, well.
It's funny because I was thinking all this time I've been making it with toast. It's probably so much better with pancakes.
It probably is.
Well, some people on Instagram have been making it and posting pictures of it, so I was happy to see it works. Because after my sister told me I got it wrong, my sister didn't read the book until it was published, and I thought, oh my God, I hope that works, because I was thinking that, but apparently it does work. But hopefully you two will try it and we need more testers on this.
I'm going
I
to,
volunteer.
yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about what you had just said about going into this home, the traditional family versus the progressive or just non-traditional family, the racism, the anti-Semitism, the drug addict, my favorite sex addict. Am I a sex addict? Like, that's the best part of the book. And again, you work it so perfectly into Mary Jane's voice. Well, I guess you just said that you write it and then go back and rewrite it. Was there a reason though that you picked certain things? Like, let's go into like the drug addict and the sex addict. Like, why did you go into, I just love the fact that Mary Jane was like, am I a sex addict? Because she didn't know what it meant.
It was so cute.
It was cute.
That's good. Well, I mean, the drug addict, I thought it has to be something big enough that the psychiatrist would clear his summer, and it has to be something where they'd move into the house. So, so it seemed like addiction seemed like a good thing. And Baltimore was a good place because you have Johns Hopkins Hospital right there, and you have Sheppard Pratt, where Zelda Fitzgerald used to check into Sheppard Pratt in Baltimore every year when she was kind of going crazy. And actually, a lot of famous people would check in there. But I think I have Dr. Cohn working at Johns Hopkins Hospital.
Yeah.
So it had to be far enough from New York that he would live there. So the drug addict. So while I was working on the book, I did read Keith Richards' memoir, and he was a heroin addict and a guitar player. So Jimmy he's not Keith Richards. Keith Richards is English, and, he's
Right.
fathered all these children, and, I love Keith Richards. He's amazing. So, but Jimmy's like, I want him to be a really great, true, I wanted to be like an American. I also want him to be from the South and to sort of defy the stereotype of what people think of as a Southerner, as far as being somebody who's close. I want him to be like open-minded, and he loves people, and he's, he'll go to church for Mary. I wanted him to be like this great guy who's a Southerner. So, but a lot of his internal life and his hair, I got from Keith Richards. So there's a lot of internal Keith Richards there about just wanting to play guitar and not really caring about fame, and just really wanting to do what you're great at and do it and get paid for it, and not wanting to deal sort of with with that incredible pressure, that sort of wall of public on you.
Right.
And then Sheba, on the other hand, was like, enjoys it. I wanted her to,
Right.
So we have both sides. But so that's the addiction. As far as the sex addiction, with Mary Jane, it's just that still to this day, it's like if I hear something, I think I have it. It's like I like almost can't watch the news or whatever. It's like somebody says the word stroke, and then I think, oh my God, I'm going to stroke out listening to somebody telling me about their stroke. So, this is just, it's a terrible affliction, but I almost don't want to know about anything, because I'll just give it to myself thinking about it. So that was just my way, if you hear something and you think that, I can't tell you how many things I think I feel like I've survived because I've had them all at this point.
I relate to that.
I was going to say, I think we both do.
We relate to that very well.
Well, I love the fact that because sex is so taboo to her also, and she just doesn't know much about sex, if at all, anything at all.
Right.
That she thinks she's a sex addict is just hilariously funny.
Yeah.
And the things that she says that makes her think she's a sex
Right.
addict is great. Like, just because she's thinking of something that might be, you know, I'm
Right.
a sex addict.
Right,
So,
the zucchini.
The zucchini.
Right. Yeah. Well, because in her house, I mean, I think that's what, I mean, there is, I mean, like I said, I see a movie in my head, I write it, but then I do revise many, many, many times. And so once I figure out what I've written, then I go back and I heighten things. So once I had that sex addict thing in there, so there's, you two are probably incredible readers because you work with a library, but there's the thing about her mother and her period and not having talked to her about it, but things magically appearing under the sink. But that was a deliberate insertion, like that was deliberately inserted later because I thought I have to, the reader needs to understand that nothing about her body has been spoken to her openly. And she's getting 1975 sex ed, which, maybe is a little unclear, at the time. And she's at a girls' school, and so I just really, so that thing about getting her period and her mother just leaving stuff was really sort of to just kind of back up this idea that she could be 14 and really just not have a sense of her body or what she thinks or how she feels about sex and her body and how she might use her body.
And I think that's so spot on, because we've spoken about in other books or other conversations that we've had about our own moms and growing up at that time. And I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. And, those things, that's exactly how parents and moms kind of, you just didn't talk about it. Things just kind of show up.
Right.
You
just use this, but you don't know how to use it.
Yes. Well, it's funny. I'll tell the story that, I had asked my mom about sex, and in a very innocent way, at, I guess, some preteen age, I don't remember. And, she gave me some convoluted answer, was very caught off guard, as moms often are. And then the next day, this book showed up all about sex on my coffee table or on the book thing. And it's funny, I'm a librarian, but like, that's how I became to, I came to learn a lot of things, is my mom just kind of that. So that to me resonated so much. I'm like, that's exactly how it was.
Right.
And even in school, you learned about things, but it kind of wasn't, everything was secret.
Right.
And, so you can sense her anxiety about this stuff.
Right.
It's so spot on.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up? I'm
Right
just
here
curious.
on Long Island.
Oh, neat. Both of you.
Yes. Well,
Oh.
I'm from Queens, New York,
Oh, wow.
but New York, and
Yeah. Wow. Neat.
and
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school, so we really didn't talk about anything.
Right. Did you get sex ed in Catholic school, or do you not even get it?
In high school, in 9th grade, we got
Right.
it, but
Yeah.
in elementary school, no.
Right. Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
We had very basic, like, I think it was 5th grade, 6th grade, very basic.
Oh, no.
This is what happens. I don't think it was sex so much as it was growing up and bodies changing and puberty and things like that. I don't think it was
Right.
actually sex. That we
Right.
learned from our friends on the playground and their big brothers and sisters or whatever.
Right.
That was kind of, the
Right.
we learned from our friends. and
We
stuff.
learned that on the street.
Yeah.
The streets of New York, right?
Speaking of Mary Jane's parents, this book had so many positives, but they were really unlikable. You mentioned that, her father especially was his distance and indifference. I would cringe reading about her dinners at the table and how he sat with the newspaper and just completely ignored the two women with him.
And also when she would sing her heart out in church, and she would look over and he didn't even notice her. So it was heartbreaking in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, what prompted you to shape, in such a heartwarming book, you shaped this character who was miserable? And we really don't know much about him, so I am kind of curious about Mary Jane's dad.
I was going by some friends' dads who I'd seen, kind of acting that way and living that way. So there was a little bit of I was pulling some stuff from memory there. And her mother, Mrs. Dillard, I mean, I try to sort of be empathic and compassionate and love all my characters. And I did have a hard time liking him, but I thought, what? I thought Mary Jane doesn't really know him. He's distant and he's cut off from her. And I thought, so I think it was okay to just sort of let him be removed and let him be who he was going to be and just see that side of him. Like maybe there is something good about him, but I thought it's not coming out to Mary Jane in her relationship, in her life with him. So we're not going to see it. And her mother, I was a little more compassionate. I thought, she does love her daughter, and there are really nice things that she's learning from her mom. I mean, just how to cook and keep, not that Mary Jane should grow up and have to keep a house, but I mean, there was value in a lot of the things. Just that her mother wanted her to be okay and to do well, and I think her mother's intentions were good, but her mother's point of view was limited. I mean, I feel like her mother was really boxed into where she was. And in a way, her mother's more naive than Mary Jane after Mary Jane's Summer at the Cones, because her mother can't imagine a life outside of what was expected of her from her parents or from her life or from her husband. And her mother is sort of has the limitation of she has a limited imagination or limited experience that she can't see past it. So I think there was a way in which, as horrible she was a little more forgivable. Oh, I think you're okay. You guys aren't frozen. You froze for a second. I got nervous.
Oh,
So, so I really was trying to see the mother with a little bit of compassion. And I steal things from people all the time from their lives. I got a note from my, so my daughters, as I said, I lived in that neighborhood, and my daughters went to the girls' school in that neighborhood. And I remember my daughter coming home. She one of her friends. I mean, just the sweetest family, but sort of politically they were the opposite of us, and just the nicest people. Though we couldn't be more far apart. And I remember my daughter, every time she went to dinner there, they would say a prayer and they would bless the president. And this was in the Bush years, and I just found that so interesting. I thought, really, they would, and I just love that. And so every time she came home from dinner at their house, I would say, "Did you say a prayer? And did you bless the president?" And and I just wanted to hear everything about their house and what was going on there, and and they were just the nicest people. So anyway, I got the mother of this child that was my daughter was friends with. I got a note from her right away. She said, "Did you get that praying from the president from my family?" I just wrote back, "I did, and thank you so much. It was such a good detail." You got to fess up to. So, but it was just such a great detail. I just love this idea of this family praying for the president. It was so great. So, so there's little things and they weren't like the Dillard family at all. This family was nothing like them. I just stole that one perfect detail.
right.
And then I got another note from Sheba says, at some point in the book, Sheba says, "If I weren't me, I'd be jealous of me." And I got a note from a woman who said, "Didn't I say that to you once?" And I said, "You did." We were standing outside of Whole Foods. And I reminded her of exactly what happened. I said, "We were standing outside of Whole Foods and you just got this great job promotion." I said, "Oh, are you happy? Do you like your new job?" And you said to me, "If I weren't me, I'd be jealous of me." And at the time I thought, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard. Like, what a great thing to walk around in life thinking, if I weren't me, I'd be jealous of me. Like, I've never felt that a second of my life. And that just seems like a dream to feel like that. So that line has been stuck in my head since, and I just gave it to Sheba. I thought, that's how Sheba is.
Yeah, I could see that.
Me too.
Yeah, that was great. I actually love the fact that at the end of the book, the mom, who again was limited and sheltered also, that she now becomes friends with Mrs. Cone and is so excited about the song for Mary Jane. Like, I love that that's what happened, so that their relationship actually moves forward. And
Right.
obviously the father not so much, but the mom definitely starts to move her relationship with Mary Jane. So I really love that about the story.
Good. Right. Well, we'll have to give that Kate Nitzel, who's my editor, credit. So that's probably the maybe, I don't know, 15th ending I wrote. So the first ending, I wrote it and Kate said, it doesn't end there. And then I wrote another one, and said, nah, that doesn't work. And then I wrote another one, it doesn't, and then we kept having these conversations about what would happen at the end. And Kate's all about, we need to feel this way, and we need to feel, and so it's a really interesting process to take somebody saying you how things should feel and try to translate a feeling into action, to go in the reverse. Usually you're writing action and it creates a feeling, but to take a feeling and it's like, how do you take this feeling and how do you give the reader this feeling in the end? And so there were just all so Kate had all these ideas about how we need to feel in the end, because I always have a hard time with my endings and I end up rewriting them. And so really, and so that ending came out of a lot of discussions with Kate and a lot of me sending her pages and her just nope, 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 and finally, landed on that. And at a certain point, I can't see my own writing well enough to know if anything's working or not, if it's so when she said, okay, this works, it was like, okay, if you say it works, it works. So
yeah, it worked.
Definitely.
It worked. Yeah.
good. Well, I'm glad you think so.
Yeah.
So, will we be seeing Mary Jane on the big screen at all, or streaming? What are the plans? Because this is like a movie. It's meant to be. Like, I want to see Mary Jane.
Oh, that's nice. Well, there was a there were offers and it was optioned. And I think I'm not allowed to say anything yet because all the papers aren't signed yet, and you know how they make announcements, and not that.
Oh, that's great.
That's fantastic.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Fun to watch for sure.
Oh, that's.
So keep your fingers crossed, because they get optioned and then it doesn't get made. It's like you got to kind of keep hoping it moves forward. But yeah, so it will, yeah, soon we can say.
Oh, good.
Yes, please let us know.
Yeah.
I will definitely let you know.
Yeah.
I'll send you an email and let you know.
That's exciting. That's so exciting. Yeah. I mean, just when you were writing, so I know you said Jimmy is Keith Richards. Who do you see as Mary Jane? Like, if you were to pick an actress, not not for your option, but just in general, like who would you?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting because some people on Twitter were talking about that, and they were naming these actresses who were that age, and they were coming up with these great people. But I don't, it's like a 14-year-old, should be maybe somewhere between 13 and 17 now. It's like, I don't know. And it's like Jimmy and Sheba, somebody came up with the best Jimmy and Sheba. Oh, somebody said Jimmy, the guy from Star is Born, that cute, great guy.
Bradley Cooper.
Oh, Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper. Somebody said Bradley Cooper for Jimmy.
Yeah.
And Lady Gaga for Sheba. I thought, well,
yeah. We were thinking, what did you say? Sonny and Cher?
Well,
we were going back.
Thinking when you were writing it, were you thinking about Sonny and Cher or the Osmonds? Like, I was just trying to think of the 70s, like if there were certain people in your head.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely thinking of Sonny and Cher and the Osmonds and Captain and Tennille, and I mean, all of those people. Remember, like, people would have variety shows. Remember, like the Osmonds had one, and Sonny and Cher had one, and I think maybe even Captain and Tennille had one. I can't quite remember, but it's like those variety shows that were just so sort of wholesome, and they'd sing a medley in the end. They'd start out with one song and sing through it, and it's so anyway, I was thinking about all that sort of 70s stuff and those 70s people. And then the other thing I do when I write always is I listen to music of the time of the book. Yeah. So, I listen to music that the characters would listen to. So for this, I was putting on, I'm in New York City right now and I don't have a car, but I had a car in the beginning when I was writing this, and I would put on Sirius 70s and just listen to 70s, 70s, 70s. But also, when I was done writing, I would tell Alexa to play Billboard Top 100 songs from 1975. So I tried to listen to mostly 75 and prior, since the book came out. The book happens in 75. So, but when you listen to Billboard Top 100 songs from 1975, I mean, there's just some amazing music that's just so great. There's like funk, and I mean, there's everything. There's like a little bit of disco starting to happen, but there's Earth, Wind and Fire, and there's Boz Scaggs, and there's Donna Summers, and there's Parliament, and and then there's folk singers. There's Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan. I mean, there's like all this whole range, and John Prine and Bonnie Raitt, and so you just get this incredible range of music in the 70s that suddenly in the 80s it all turns sort of like.
We're losing you a little bit.
Electronic and mechanical, but how are you? Am I back? Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Yeah. Ah, okay. Hi. So anyway, I did listen to all that music, and and I loved it all. Like Glenn Campbell is so, it's like I love all that music, but of course, I love Cher. Is there anybody who doesn't love Cher? I mean, she's amazing, and so she was on my mind too.
That's awesome. We have some comments in our chat, so we'll read them. Um, so from Judy, have you told Ann Tyler the story about Eddie's?
I didn't. I mean, I only, other than seeing her there, I've only met her once. I was at this very tiny cocktail party in Baltimore, and there was maybe 15 or 20 people, and it was this kind of hushy hush, quiet cocktail party. And and I started talking to this woman and just chit chatting, and I was in the middle of talking to her when I realized it was Aunt. Like I wasn't seeing, I was just, and of course she's this beautiful woman, and she's so unpretentious, and she's got this beautiful face, and she had her hair back in a bun, and she's wearing this dress, but she, she doesn't really draw attention to herself, and so I was talking to her for so long before I realized it was her, and that was the only time I've ever met her. So I didn't, I had to control my awe of her at the time, but uh, so I don't know if anyone else has told her. I mean, she still is in Baltimore, so she's around that same neighborhood, and
Wow.
I mean, hopefully somebody's told her. I mean, she's amazing. I love her, but other than that brief meeting at the cocktail party with cocktail chit chat, I don't know her. Yeah.
Um, Wendy would like
I
to
mean,
know.
Baltimore is a small town and you meet everybody, so it isn't an unusual ask if you would have told somebody,
Okay, I think can you hear me now? I think we're on top of each other.
Yeah. We're a little out of sync.
Oh, I hear you.
Okay.
Oh, am I back?
Yes. Wendy asked, did the Celebrities Diary book ever get published?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. We'll leave it at that.
I mean, I haven't been, there've been a couple texts back and forth, but I haven't been in touch with her, and I think I have too much pride to ask if how's it going or if it's done. Which is stupid. Pride is dumb, but I haven't asked. And there really have been like 2 or 3 texts, and that's it, minimal.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, she fired you. What do you care?
Yeah.
We're not going to read it either.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Dorothy said, I connected with the book because I was 14 in 1975 and just moved to a new neighborhood. So when you say being in others' homes was always intriguing, I can so relate. The book is wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice to hear.
Steve asked, I read The Wonder Bread Summer, which I loved, and noticed similarities between Mary Jane and Allie when it comes to them coming from sheltered lives and being somewhat naive. And I'm curious what draws you to this coming out of your shell theme and the fish out of water story both of those characters experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, the books are so different. I mean, they both sort of are me internally, Allie in The Wonder Bread Summer and Mary Jane. But Allie's obviously in a very different place than Mary Jane. I mean, Allie's in Berkeley, and um, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's something about just being a girl, woman, young person, and finding your way in the world. Maybe that's interesting. I mean, the world's an interesting place, and everywhere you go is interesting. It's like, so the Wonder Bread Summer takes place in Berkeley, where I went to school, and I remember going to Berkeley and just sort of feeling like my mind was exploding. I'd come from this little beachy town in Southern California, and suddenly I was in Berkeley, and it was just like, I just couldn't believe that this was part of the world, or that this was part of the United States. It was just like this strange city island that seemed unlike any other place I'd been to. And so I mean, I think it's nice to be shocked by the world, and it's nice to see something bigger than yourself. And I don't know, maybe, I mean, I still feel that when I go places. It's like, you know, it's great to see how different everything is. It's and
Right.
so I don't know. I mean, that's such a good question, but they both sort of are me internally, and maybe it's because I constantly feel like I'm behind or like I'm not one of the cool people. Or I mean, I do always feel like an outsider. When I was a little kid, I had no friends. My only friend was a 70-year-old woman, and I used to sit and have tea with her, and we watched the other kids play. I
Aw.
just I just didn't get kids, and I didn't get the way they played. It just seemed like a lot of chaos, and it almost seemed like violence the way that, it was just like, and I would go to school, and I was the kid who would sit on the bench with the teacher and just eat my lunch and watch the kids play. Like I always felt really outside them. And then when I was around 8, I had girlfriends for the first time, and then I had a pack of girlfriends, and it felt so good to have friends. But
Right.
I think I never kind of lost that outsider feeling, and I still always felt like the strange one. And like I said, our house was like the cone house. We had like the messy, chaotic house in a neighborhood of tidy, neat, perfect homes. So, I did feel like the weirdo outsider just in that way.
Right.
I mean, everywhere I went, I felt like an outsider. Then I went to Berkeley, and I felt like the Southern California beach chick when that was so uncool in Berkeley. And then I went to Canada, and I felt like the smiley American. I remember talking to people, and talking to a woman like in this little plaza, and she started saying things, and I realized she thought I was trying to date her or pick up on her, and I thought, no, I'm just from California. I'm just being friendly. I mean, I didn't even know how to respond. I just said, "Oh, I think I said something like, oh, I just wanted to go work out at the Y or something." I mean, I was just so, but I realized she was so confused by me because I was such a freak there. And then I moved to Baltimore, and suddenly I was, Baltimore was like this, it was like the people who lived in that neighborhood where I lived had lived there. Their parents had lived there, and their grandparents had lived there, and they had gone to the school, and their mother went to school, and it was like they were all these generations of tradition, and I felt like such an outsider freak there. So I think maybe I always feel like the outsider looking in, and so I always feel like the foreigner. And so with Allie in Wonder Bread, she's kind of alone and lost, and she's trying to grasp onto something and find family in a way. She's searching for family in that book. And with Mary Jane, she finds the family with the cone. So maybe it's just my outsider perspective in both those books.
Wow. That's interesting. It's like you're always coming of age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like every
right.
situation,
Right.
you're always.
Constantly coming of age. That's me. Yes.
So we have comments, Dorothy, wonderful. She loves the fact that people are talking about Bradley Cooper, and she loved the record store scene in the book.
Oh, thank you.
Caroline, I am from Baltimore and grew up in the 80s, and this book was so like my life, except the rock star summer. Thanks. Thanks for a great read. And
Oh.
Dorothy asked, have you met John Waters?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, in the woman who said she grew up in Baltimore, and I mean, so she understands Baltimore. It's such a strange town in that if there is a celebrity in town, you will meet them and run into them. So from my kitchen window where I was last living, I looked into John Waters' house. He lived right behind me, and so I would see him around and run into him. And I don't think he would know me or my name, but I was invited to his Christmas party a couple of years and went. And so, he has this big Christmas party. And, when you walk in his house, he has an actual electric chair in the entrance hall. So that's where you start when you enter the house, is the electric chair.
Wow.
And, and he's got an amazing art collection. And he also has rubber food all over the house. So no matter where you are, there's like fake rubber food, like sushi and donuts, and it's just everywhere. But the other thing that he has that I think you would appreciate is he has floor to ceiling, wall to wall bookshelves in so many rooms. I mean, he's an incredible reader, and he has an incredible collection of books. And from my poking around and snooping around at the 2 or 3 Christmas parties I've been to, it seems like he has, nonfiction in one room and movie books in one room and fiction in another, but really, and I mean, I would love to spend, a few weeks there just kind of poking through his books. It's a really impressive library he has.
Wow, that's
great.
incredible. Yeah. Actually, Caroline, she said she was from Baltimore. She says we call it Small-Timore, the city with a small town feel.
It's true. I mean, it's just one of those places where I don't know how it works. Maybe because I'm an outsider there, but it's like, if you want to meet John Waters, you will run into him, or, it's like you you do see people, and people are very accessible and open, and there's so many great artists and writers and creative people around there. It's a cool city. I mean, it really is an interesting city.
So we're almost at the end of our program. We usually do a lightning round. Would you be game to play a little lightning round with us?
Of course.
So we put 60 seconds on our phones, and we'll ask you some quick questions, and you just tell us what you're feeling, what comes to mind.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Set, go.
Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon Prime?
Netflix.
Okay. What are you currently binging?
Oh, on Netflix. Nothing, because I haven't had I haven't had anything, but the last thing I binged was Gavin and Stacey, which is an English show, which is incredibly sweet and loving and fun, which I just loved.
Oh, I'll have to look at that. Okay. What's your favorite pandemic snack or cocktail?
Oh, I was making smoothies. I was just like, I got one of those NutriBullets.
Yep.
I was
Right.
just throwing. Oh, I think it started with like I was ordering groceries online, and I don't know what my problem is, but for some reason I can't understand the picture in the online grocery and what I'm getting. So I would think I was ordering like gallons of almond milk, and I would get like a lunchbox thing of almond milk, and then I would think I was ordering like 4 bananas or 5 bananas, this actually happened. I thought I ordered 5 bananas, and I got 5 massive bunches of bananas, and they were like 8 or 10 in a bunch. And it was just like, what am I gonna do? I tried to give them away, but everybody in my apartment building in New York had kind of fled. There were like 5 of us in this entire building, and so I cut them up and put them in the freezer, and it was just like it was smoothie land. So it was smoothies was my pandemic, everything with bananas.
Okay.
That was a minute, but we'll do another.
Okay, we have one more.
Oh.
What character of a book, not yours, or a TV movie series would you like to have dinner or lunch with?
Oh, wow. That's so hard. Who would I like to have lunch with? Oh, if we're talking about TV, like, I watched Schitt's Creek all the way through. I would love to sit down with that whole family and hang and just have dinner. I'd like to spend a week with them and just hang out.
That's a good
And,
one.
and then a book. I mean, right now I'm reading, oh, what's her name? It's William. It comes out in October. What's my mother's here sitting near me. What was the name? Oh, anyway, what was, I can't remember. Anyway, she's an amazing writer. She has all these characters, and sorry, it's just
That's okay.
too
Don't
much
look it up.
pressure. My name is Lucy Barton. Who wrote that book?
My name is Lucy Barton.
I know.
It's the best book, and she has a new book coming out.
Okay.
Anyway, that character, I love that character, Lucy Barton.
Okay.
She would be a really fun character to hang out
Elizabeth
with.
Strout.
Elizabeth Strout, she's amazing. I mean, it's like she's like one of the greatest writers living today. I just love her so much. But I love that character, Lucy Barton. She has a new book coming out in October, which I'm sure you have seen already, that I'm reading right now. It's so great. So that character.
Oh, that's good. And what are you working on? I didn't even ask. What's your next book, or are you working on a next book?
I'm working on a book. My editor has it right now, and she's giving me some major notes for, so I think it's going to be just completely overhauled or maybe just tossed and rewritten. And I'm also working on a screenplay.
Oh,
That's exciting.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. We hope that you'll come back and talk to us about
Yeah.
that, in the future.
Definitely. I'll come back anytime. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we're at the end of our program. This was awesome. Thank you so much, Jessica,
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
meeting us tonight on your vacation. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Again, we loved Mary Jane. It really was a favorite of ours over the summer, and we wish you all the success in the world, and we hope that you do come back, and maybe in
Thank you.
person.
Yeah. We
No, I
get to
will.
do those things again.
I know.
Th- Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for reading the book and recommending it. I appreciate it so much. It's so nice to have nice readers.
You're
Thank
very
you so
welcome.
much. So again, to all our patrons that joined us tonight, thank you so much for joining us and for supporting our programs. Again, please visit pagingoceanside.com for more information. And everyone have a great night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
I
Thank you.
just, I just hit leave. Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.